Tony Stewart is returning to Fox Sports booth at Circuit of the Americas. Marcus Biffin confirms that there most likely will not be a Cup Series race at COTA, and a lot of drivers voiced their opinions on the new configuration of Atlanta Motor Speedway. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got a ton of NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into those really quickly. We're going to start off with some paint schemes and sponsorship news first. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into those really quickly. First paint scheme we're taking a look at is Jeremy Clemens' 2022 throwback scheme, which is a throwback to Bud Moore and Dale Earnhardt's scheme from the 1980s. Also, Spartan Bird and Spartan West are going to sponsor before race as well, and this is a throwback to that. This paint scheme looks really cool in my opinion. I think did a great job on this throwback, and it looks really nice, and I'm looking forward to see this paint scheme out on the racetrack here later this year in the throwback race. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Austin Dillon's 2020 Bennett family scheme that we're going to see this weekend at COTA, and we're also going to see multiple races as well as they've enhanced their partnerships. This is really cool in my opinion. I've been a big fan of the Bennett family schemes that Austin Hill has had, and I think did a really good job. Numbers in a pretty good position, and I'm looking forward to see on the racetrack here at Circuit Americas. And the final paint scheme as of now we're taking a look at is Chris Buescher's 2020 fifth third bank scheme that we'll see, I believe, this weekend at COTA and a couple races as well. This paint scheme's alright in my opinion. It's not my favorite. I don't like the color shades and all that stuff that they have on the car. It is cool that the fifth third bank is continuing, though, their partnerships with the team. Happy to see that they are continuing, and good luck to them on that pretty awesome feat that they are returning. Pretty awesome, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of this today's episode, as we're unfortunately taking this episode to a sour note. As unfortunately was announced this morning, On Points Motorsports tweeted out that James Weiner unfortunately passed away. James Weiner, for a lot of you who do not know, was the owner of JGL Racing, a NASCAR Xfinity Series team that was around from, I believe, from around in the mid-2000s all the way up to around 2018 or 2019. Drivers like Dakota Armstrong and Kaz Gralla, among other drivers, and JJ Yeley, Corey LaJoie, have driven from this organization. A very mid-pack team in the NASCAR Xfinity Series, but a team that gave a lot of drivers a really good opportunity. Really unfortunate what happened right there. My prayers and condolences definitely go out to the family of him. Very unfortunate situation. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Flo Rida. As it was announced on Saturday that Flo Rida is going to be headliner at Atlanta Motor Speedway in July. Flo Rida, for those who don't know, was a very popular rapper and singer. Well, he did sing as well, mainly a rapper that was in the game from around, basically has had hits really from since the late 2000s all the way up to the late 2010s. Flo Rida has been in for a long time. I do love the NASCAR is going more diverse and adding more people like him into it. Again, getting away from those country singers. No disrespect, a lot of country singers, but I think that you do have to somewhat diversify up and change things from time to time. So overall, great decision right there. They've done that, and very happy to see that they are bringing someone else out to the track. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, is we're talking about Richard Childress. It was reported by Adam Stern on Saturday that Richard Childress' 1 million bullet donation to Ukraine is on the country's border waiting to be picked up, and Ammo Inc. CEO said public support has been mostly positive, but that he got a death threat and turned it over to the FBI. This is absolutely nuts that it basically got turned over to the FBI. The fact, for those of you who have not been following the story, Richard Childress wanted to basically send 1 million bullets out to Ukraine, basically trying to help the Ukrainian soldiers currently in the battle of Ukraine, basically with the war going on with Ukraine versus Russia right now. He's trying to help out with that. I think it's a really cool donation, but it's just nuts the fact that basically the bullets had to get picked up because of very serious situations. So absolutely nuts and absolutely crazy what happened right there. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, is we're talking about the Raymond Brothers Racing hauler. Now, if you watch the NASCAR Xfinity Series race, you know that there was a hauler that got stuck. I think it was in stage number 3 late in the race. I think a caution around 60 or 50 laps to go. I believe a hauler got stuck going into the wrong tunnel and basically got stuck. It was a Raymond Brothers Racing car, and pretty much it got a ton of damage, which was a shame because Chris Hacker had a really strong run with Raymond Brothers Racing, and unfortunately that car would get involved in a wreck in the grass later. But the truck and the hauler would get a lot of damage. Luckily for them, it wasn't too serious to the point they probably will be able to fix it up, but I don't know what's with all these haulers for whatever reason having major problems and issues. Definitely crazy for sure, and overall someone's probably getting fired because you can't have that situation happening where that happens. So overall, in my opinion, crazy stuff right there. The hauler got destroyed. It was nuts. I was like, what the hell happened? So overall, very crazy situation. And now we're going to move on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about Atlanta Motor Speedway. Now, Atlanta Motor Speedway has hosted races since 1960, and it was basically talked about this race is probably going to have a lot of lead changes. And as expected, this Cup Series race had the most lead changes in the history of Atlanta Motor Speedway. I believe the record had been around 39 to 40 in one race back in the 60s, and I believe now the record is around 50 to 60 lead changes. Absolutely insane how many lead changes were when it comes to the racing. Now, we're going to talk a lot about the racing overall and my thoughts on the configuration aside from when we get into what the drivers were saying. But overall, to me, the most lead changes in the history of Atlanta Motor Speedway. It's not because it is technically a super speedway now. So we come back here in Atlanta. I know it's 400 miles, but do I think that they need? Do I think we'll read it next time we come back here? I do not think we're going to beat it. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about drivers under 30. As the record still continues currently in the Cup Series for drivers winning under the age of 30. The last 11 straight Cup Series races, we're not counting the Busch Light Clash because that is an exhibition event. The last 11 straight points-paying victories have been won by drivers who are under age of 30 years old. This includes Kyle Larson, Alex Bowman, Austin Cindric, Chase Briscoe, and William Byron. 5 or 6 of these guys have been able to go to victory lane in the last 11 races. And another crazy fact, every single race so far in NASCAR's top 3 divisions has been won by drivers under the age of 30 years old. Now, some drivers, of course, like Kyle Larson, among other guys, are going to be 30 soon, but no driver under the age of 31 years old has won a Cup Series race in a very, very long time. And it shows that there is a youth movement going on currently in the Cup Series right now. I've been saying this for a long time, but there's definitely a youth movement. It's been building for the last couple of years, but I think it's awesome to see that the youth movement is alive and well. And I think the younger drivers are figuring these cars out a lot quicker than other drivers. So overall, very exciting to see and glad to see the drivers under the age of 30 continue to go out there and win these races. Pretty awesome, to be honest with you. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, is we're talking about Jennifer Jo Cobb Racing. It was reported by Chris Knight on Twitter, and he says that Jennifer Jo Cobb Racing is reorganizing and is going to run a limited schedule in 2022. The focus for them to potentially return is at Kansas, Charlotte, and Nashville. Now, Jennifer Jo Cobb Racing has been in the Truck Series since around, I think, 2009 or 2010, and they've been in series for many, many years, but they've never been a super competitive team. And it looks like that they are reorganizing and trying to focus on making better equipment and trying to make it out to these races. Now, Jennifer Jo Cobb is not overall the greatest driver in the world, but the more teams we can get out there, the better. I believe similar to North Benny's situation, I think there's some parts and technicalities because there's some changes to the trucks this year, similar to the Cup Series. There were some changes to the Truck Series, so they want to get those specs up really, really good. That's why they probably decided to not run the whole entire season. Overall, hopefully we'll see him back at the track really, really soon. Hopefully we can, because I want to see more trucks in the field in the future. So overall they can get the situation fixed. Hope to see him back at the track really, really soon. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, is we're talking about I Am NASCAR. Now, Adam Stern reported this on Friday, but we saw some of his ads this weekend. He reports that NASCAR debuted a new I Am NASCAR ad this weekend at Atlanta Motor Speedway, and it's going to run through Spring Talladega in late April. This ad is really, really good, by the way. If you did not see it on TV, if you skipped through the commercials or did not listen to the commercials, this commercial is really, really good. My hope with these ads is that they can promote these out really, really good, and we can see these out on, continue to see these more longer as the season progresses. So I think it's a good I Am NASCAR. I hope they continue to bring these more than just late April with Talladega. I think it's good, and hopefully we'll see more people show up to the track. And overall, I think it's really, really good to see that they are continuing to do this ad. I think it's a really awesome ad, to be honest with you. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, is we're talking about Chase Elliott. Now, Chase Elliott was reported during the Fox broadcast and throughout the week that Chase Elliott was going to be competing in a late model race. Now, Chase Elliott did compete in a late model race, and he actually ended up finishing second to, I believe, Landon Bigley. Because Landon Bigley posted on basically was really enthused. He got to beat Chase Elliott, also got to race against Chase Elliott. I think it's really awesome when you have Cup Series drivers or drivers in NASCAR's top 3 divisions. When you have those guys go out there and race, I think that's really, really fun to see. And the fact that Chase Elliott's going out there is going to help him in dirt and might be able to help him out when it comes to bristle dirt as well. That's actually coming up here on Easter in about a month from now. So that early experience, I think, is going to help him out overall. So really awesome to see for sure, and glad to see that Chase Elliott was able to compete in that. That's really, really cool, to be honest with you. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, is we're talking about Kyle Weatherman. Now, Kyle Weatherman, of course, is coming off a very, very strong run at Atlanta Motor Speedway. But as of right now, Kyle Weatherman will not be racing this weekend at Circuit of the Americas due to sponsorship. Now, he originally had only signed, I believe, a 5-race deal to race this season with DGM Racing. In my opinion, it is absolutely criminal that he is not racing full-time with a top-tier team. I would like to see this guy get an opportunity in a really, really good car. He absolutely deserves it. We talk a lot about Parker Kligerman, and don't get me wrong, Parker Kligerman deserves a great opportunity. But if you've watched this guy through the years, he's won ARCA. He has an ARCA win, for Christ's sake. He's been fast in Maycee Racing. He got their best finish ever and their best run ever, and has been consistently in the top 20 in pretty much every single race. In my opinion, this guy needs to be in a good car. If Joe Gibbs Racing has a car available for an upcoming race in the future, give this guy an opportunity in an All-Star car and see what he can do. This guy absolutely deserves an opportunity. And if Kyle, if you're watching my video, man, I do hope that you get to have an opportunity because you absolutely deserve it. You're a great driver. Hopefully, he'll get an opportunity to race in a really good car here in the future. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, is we're talking about Sage Karam. Now, it was reported on the Fox broadcast that Sage Karam is wanting to go full-time in NASCAR. Now, there was a sit-down that Sage Karam had very recently. I believe it was Dustin Lawson. He is looking to eventually go full-time in NASCAR. Now, it's been said for the last year or so that Sage Karam is trying to transition away from IndyCar and has been wanting to come over to NASCAR. Of course, he's made a couple starts, and I believe this year he's running around 10 to 11 starts this year with Alpha Prime Racing. He made his debut this past weekend at Atlanta and actually had a really strong and a really good run. Sage Karam also will be competing in the Indianapolis 500 with Dreyer Ryan Bull Racing and has not raced full-time at IndyCar, I believe, since 2015 or 2016 when he drove for Chip Ganassi Racing. Sage Karam is a very talented driver who's had some good runs. In fact, he was running the top 5 before, unfortunately, getting involved in a wreck late. This guy, I want to see full-times. If more that IndyCar presence in the series, I think would be really cool. So I hope that we get to see him at the track again, and hopefully we will see him back more for races again. He's supposed to run a lot of races here. Let's hope he gets to show up for more races. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Riley Herbst versus Maycee. Now, if you watch the NASCAR Xfinity Series race, you saw the contact between Riley Herbst and Maycee late in this race. Basically, on one of the late restarts around 3 laps ago, you have Maycee, who was basically having an issue and his car was really sparking. Riley Herbst tries to make a pass to the inside and unfortunately ends up turning Maycee. Riley Herbst has some comments after the race, and Maycee did not really seem to be really mad at Riley Herbst. Maycee wasn't not seeing mad, so there were no major issues between these two. Looking at the situation, in my opinion, I think it's Maycee's team's fault for keeping him out there, but I don't blame them for keeping them out there for as long as they did. At the time, I was mad at Riley Herbst. If you saw me on Twitter, I was not the happiest, and this situation could have been avoided. But the situation could have been avoided if Maycee would have come down pit road. But at the same time, I get and understand why they decided to keep Maycee out. It's a very tough situation, and I know a lot of people are going to be in disagreement with me on this point. But at the same time, I think that what happened there could have been absolutely avoided and probably should have never happened. So overall, it does suck overall what happened. I feel for Maycee right there, but at the same time, he unfortunately kind of put himself in that bad position. So definitely unfortunate, but it is what it is. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Carlos Sainz. As Carlos Sainz has reached a new agreement with Ferrari. Now, the contract has not been announced at this time how long he'll be with the team, but Carlos Sainz is expected to basically have a contract extension with the Ferrari organization. Especially after a very strong run at the beginning of the year, how strong Ferrari has looked to start this year in Formula 1, it's not a major surprise that Carlos Sainz is looking to continue racing with Ferrari. It seems like Ferrari, like I said, has got their stuff together, and Carlos Sainz has outperformed the equipment over the last couple years, and a driver that I think is very close to winning races in Formula 1. I think he absolutely deserves his contract extension. He's a really good driver, and I think one of the most underrated drivers in Formula 1, and absolutely, I think, could be a championship contender in Formula 1 this season. So, very happy to see he's coming back to Ferrari. I think he absolutely deserves it. We'll probably know more about the contracts in the near future, but very excited to see that he's coming back and racing with the team. He absolutely deserves it, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, is we're talking about Josh Bilicki, as Josh Bilicki is going to be driving the 45 for Alpha Prime Racing at Circuit of the Americas. Now, Josh Bilicki, I believe, is supposed to make a couple starts with this team throughout the season, but he will be making his first start with the team this weekend at Circuit of the Americas. Josh Bilicki, of course, has made a couple starts so far in the Cup Series and actually got his first top 20 finish of the season this past weekend at Atlanta Motor Speedway. I think Josh Bilicki is a very good driver, and he's getting a great opportunity right here to race with a pretty solid organization. His organization, I think, will be very, very fast. And Josh Bilicki is a really, really good and a great road course racer. So I think he's going to do really, really well. I'm very excited to see these back in the truck, basically his Xfinity Series car, I should say, and very excited to see what he can do this weekend. He absolutely deserves to be back in the car, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Brad Perez. As Brad Perez is going to drive the 43 for Ram Brothers Racing with GMS backing this weekend at Circuit Americas. He'll be making his NASCAR debut. Brad Perez basically has been working with the 25 for Rackley WAR Racing, been working with them for the last couple years as like pit crew member and media members and stuff, and work with them as like working the engineering side of things. And now he's getting his first opportunity to race in the Truck Series. This is such a cool opportunity for this guy. This guy has worked really, really hard to get an opportunity to race. He raced actually in an ARCA race or two last year, I believe, at Watkins Glen. It was actually running really well before mechanical problems came in. He was on the verge of getting, I believe, a top 10 finish, and there were mechanical problems coming in. This guy absolutely deserves this opportunity. He's worked really, really hard to get there. And Brad, I don't know if you watch my videos or not, man, but I want to say huge congratulations, man, on the opportunity. You absolutely deserve it, and I cannot wait to see what you can do behind the wheel, because you absolutely deserve this opportunity, man, and congrats on the opportunity with the Ram Brothers Racing organization. You deserve it, man. Congratulations. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Preston Pardus. As Preston Pardus is going to drive the 91 for DGM Racing this weekend at Circuit of the Americas. It's unclear how many races Preston Pardus is going to race for the team. Maycee has driven the first 5 races in the 91 car. He's supposed to run a majority, but now Preston Pardus is getting a huge opportunity here. Preston Pardus is a really good road course racer. If you've watched him with DGM Racing in the past, you know that he can get it done behind the wheel. And I think that he will have a very, very solid run. Now, what are my overall expectations of Preston Pardus? I think Preston Pardus will contend for a top 20 this weekend at COTA. I think the road course guys are really going to be really, really fast here, and I think that Preston Pardus will and should be able to have a good run here. So good luck to Preston Pardus. Excited to see he's back in the 91, and glad to see that he's getting back behind the wheel, to be honest with you. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Logan Boyd. As Logan Boyd is going to drive the 37 for AM Motorsports this season. His first start is going to be at Circuit Americas, and will run a couple other races with AM Motorsports this year. AM Motorsports is going to have a second truck, and that truck is expected to run 6 to 10 races. This is a really exciting opportunity for Logan Boyd. Logan Boyd, I believe, made his Truck Series debut last year with Nice Motorsports and did okay in that truck, but didn't do absolutely amazing. Logan has a lot, I think, some dirt experience, but also has some road course experience in Trans Ams. He's been racing in Trans Ams the last year or so, and I think that Logan has the potential to do well, considering I think that AM Motorsports definitely this year looks a lot more competent when it comes to their speed than they've looked in the past. So very exciting opportunity for sure. What are my overall expectations for him? I think that he will have a very solid run here, and I think potentially a top 20 or top 25 would be a great front for him. Hope he does well. He deserves this opportunity, and good luck to him. Hopefully, he can do really, really good behind the wheel, and I'm very excited to see that Logan Boyd is getting a huge opportunity here. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Hailie Deegan. Now, if you watch the NASCAR Camping World Truck Series in this year so far, Hailie Deegan has not had a really good start. But during the NASCAR Truck Series race, you probably noticed that her truck unfortunately caught on fire. It seemed like the tire basically caught on fire, and basically smoke came into the cockpit. She did release a statement and basically show what happened. She said she basically started suffocating, and she did say she is okay. She basically declined talking to the media. A lot of people wonder why she did not have an interview, because she basically was coughing. She basically said during it that she was coughing a lot, and basically every second. So I don't entirely blame her. We take safety for granted a lot of times in NASCAR, but even yes, the safety is much better in the sport. It definitely is a very, very dangerous sport to be part of. And again, she's had a lot of bad luck to start this year. All three of the races that she's had so far this year in the wrecks have really not been her fault. And unfortunately, Colby Howard was a little bit over-aggressive. I think Colby has a lot of talent, don't get me wrong, but he was way too over-aggressive and way over his head being out there and should have been a little bit more cautious when he was out there. I want to see Haley do very, very well. She absolutely deserves the opportunity to be there and get the experience. And again, I hope that she can get back behind the wheel. I saw some controversy on Twitter with a certain YouTuber that I'm not going to mention, but overall, very, very situation for Haley Deegan, and glad to see that she is okay, and she'll be back in a couple next week at COTA. She needs to have a good run, though, because she's basically going to be really low on the owner's points. She has done great in road course racing, so hopefully she can turn that around here this weekend at Circuit of the Americas. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Chandler Smith versus John Hunter Nemechek. Now, if you watched Camping World Truck Series race at Atlanta Motor Speedway for the NASCAR Xfinity Series race took place, there was some controversy late in the race. So late in the race, John Hunter Nemechek was multiple laps down, and unfortunately for him, John Hunter decides to make a very, very bold and kind of not the greatest move. Chandler Smith is leading on the white flag, and Chandler Smith, instead of helping out John Hunter Nemechek, instead of helping out Chandler Smith, he decides to help out Corey Heim pick up his first victory. And Chandler Smith was mad about it. He was not happy. He said, yes, he basically helped our organization win, but he helped our other teammate win. And then John Hunter Nemechek responded later saying he wanted the organization to win. When I look at the situation with John Hunter Nemechek and Chandler Smith, look, I think it's a little bit egregious that basically John Hunter did not help out Chandler Smith. But I think he did it because he doesn't want Chandler Smith to win the championship. John Hunter knows that Chandler Smith is a championship threat this year. Chandler Smith's looked the best all year. He's probably right now the favorite to win the title. And he doesn't want John Hunter does not want Chandler Smith to win because he knows that if John Hunter doesn't win this, Chandler Smith wins, it's not going to be good for John Hunter and he's going to lose points. So that's why he basically helped out Corey Heim win. Chandler Smith definitely was happy Corey Heim won, but he wanted to win the race. And I do not entirely blame Chandler Smith for being upset in this situation with John Hunter. I think John Hunter maybe should have helped Chandler Smith out. It was more egregious than what happened with Kyle Busch and Kurt Busch last year, and Kyle Larson and Joey Logano in that situation last year. So overall, in my opinion, I look at the situation a little bit egregious. I don't understand why you wouldn't help your team out, but it is what it is overall, and that is definitely crazy right there. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Buddy Kofoy. As Buddy Kofoy is expected, is expected to make his series debut at Bristol Dirt in the 51 for Kyle Busch Motorsports. While it's not been officially announced, it was reported by Candace Spencer on Twitter, who basically is a reporter. She said he's expecting to make his debut at Bristol Dirt here in a month or so. Buddy Kofoy is one of the most talented young and upcoming Toyota development drivers. He has said in the past that he would like to make some starts. If you've watched the Chili Bowl this year and watched Chili Bowl the last couple of years as a Toyota development driver for the Keith Kunz Motorsports organization, you have seen that this guy has performed extremely well. And I think that this guy will get behind the wheel and do really, really well. I think, honestly, when it comes to this, I think he's got a genuine shot to go out there and win. I really think he does, because this truck actually won the last time we were at Bristol Dirt. Yes, it was, of course, a Mark Truex Jr. was in the car, but I think that Buddy Kofoy can get in there and actually contend for the victory. He's a very talented driver. I know these cars are different than the cars he usually runs, the midget cars and the late model stuff he runs. But I think that Buddy Kofoy is going to do really, really good. And again, we have not had official confirmation on this, but it's expected that Buddy Kofoy will make his Truck Series debut at Bristol Dirt here really, really soon. Very intrigued to see what other dirt ringers are going to run the event, but I'm very excited to see that Buddy Kofoy is expecting to make his Truck Series debut at Bristol Dirt here in about a month. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Andy Lally. As Andy Lally was announced, he will drive the 78 for Live Fast Motorsports this weekend at Circuit of the Americas. Yes, I am so pumped to see that Andy Lally is back in the NASCAR Cup Series. Andy Lally has not made a Cup Series start, I think, since around 2007. It's been a long time since Andy Lally has raced in the Cup Series. Of course, the 2011 NASCAR Cup Series Rookie of the Year winner, but also a really good road course racer. And I think that this could be the best opportunity that the Live Fast Motorsports organization has really had. Yes, they've had other road course racers like Scott Hecker get behind the wheel and Kyle Tilley get behind the wheel. And yes, they haven't performed great. But Andy Lally, of all the people they've gotten to get in this car, in all the different drivers and classes they've had, this has been the best shot I think they've had to do really, really good. Andy Lally still knows how to get it done. He's been competing, of course, in the Rolex and has been out to win many Rolex races. And I think that he is someone that is going to do very, very well in this car. So this has got me, again, I am very pumped up to see that Andy Lally is getting back behind the wheel in this car. My expectations are, you know what? I think this team's got a shot at top 25. The 78 team is really doing great in owners points right now, by the way. They've only had one finish outside of top 30, and their goal is top 30 all year. So really exciting stuff for sure. Very exciting to see that Andy Lally is getting back behind the wheel, and he absolutely deserves it here. So huge congratulations to the team, and I'm very excited to see that Andy Lally is getting back behind the wheel here at Circuit of the Americas this weekend. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about street circuits. As Rick Hendrick said during the post-race, that he said that he'd like to see the Cup Series race on a street circuit in the future. Now, we're going to talk about this for a few minutes because the street circuit, there's a future around street circuits here, potentially as early as next year. For a lot of you that have not been following the story in regards to the potential of street circuit racing, there's been a lot of talk that as early as next year, there could be a Chicago street course race. Now, that is unclear. There's still a lot of politics that come into play, and that's one thing when it comes to street course racing, is there's a lot of politics that come into play with street course racing. That being said, though, there is a very strong possibility that it will probably end up happening, and there's a couple reasons why I'm also like Rick Hendrick. I do also want to see a street circuit. Number one, a street circuit brings it to the city and brings it to the fans. Fans do not have to commit multiple hours of their time out to a racetrack. It takes a long time for some of these fans to commit. If you bring it to the city, especially to all those NASCAR fans, they don't have to travel too far, and even brings to new casual fans who have not watched before in the past. So to me, that's another big reason right there. Another big thing is the fan experience and how much the fans tend to get engaged with it. Look at some of the street circuits for IndyCar in the past and even for the Penny Series. Fans get really pumped and excited. And go back to National Street Course. That got the city buzzing. And yes, it definitely is a money thing, and it's going to cost a lot of money when it comes to that. But to me, a street circuit race absolutely needs to happen. Now, the racing may not be the greatest, but the most important thing is the fan experience. That if that does happen next year, and there's very likely chance it could happen next year, the fans are going to be what's the most important thing. So I hope it does happen. I think it'd be really awesome. And yeah, I really hope we get to see more street circuits in the future again. But here's the thing for me. I do not want to see more than one street circuit. Just like we'll talk about Atlanta a little bit, I do not want to see more than one street circuit. I think more than one is going to be too much. Keep its own unique thing. I do love that NASCAR is also looking to diversify the schedule and go to more countries and stuff, but I do not want to see more than one street circuit on the NASCAR Cup Series schedule or any schedule. I think too many street circuits will be bad. You're overburdening the schedule. I love diversity, and I hope that this is the only street circuit. If it does happen, this is most likely Chicago. I know that Denver's also been in talk of conversation. Even Mexico City's been in talk of conversation. But I think if we're going to see a street course race, it's probably going to happen in Chicago, because Chicago is a market that NASCAR is trying to get up to currently at the moment. So I do agree for Kendrick, though. I do want to see a street course race here in the near future. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about the Bahrain GP. Yes, I'm talking about a Formula 1 race on my channel. Let's talk about the Bahrain GP here for a second. So, if you did watch the Bahrain Grand Prix, the opening race of Formula 1 in this season, you saw a pretty good race. Charles Leclerc picked up his first victory and Ferrari's first victory since 2019. And it looks like right now the two teams to beat, what looks like on speed, are the Ferraris and the Red Bull cars. Now, Red Bull unfortunately imploded at the end of the race, basically in the last 5 laps. Basically, engine problems. They were both on the verge of potentially at least getting 3rd and 4th, and unfortunately, they imploded. The podium would be Charles Leclerc, Carlos Sainz, and Lewis Hamilton, which Lewis Hamilton, to be honest with you, does not look like a championship threat right now. It looks like right now that it's going to be basically coming down between the Ferraris and the Red Bulls. Yes, Red Bull definitely did implode this race, but I do think that the Ferraris look like that they are currently the team to beat. Generally, the Mercedes plant was horrendous. I think besides the situation of Pierre Gasly and the Red Bulls, the Mercedes plant, the Racing Point team was really, really off. The McLarens were off. A lot of the teams in the Mercedes plant were really, really off. Kevin Madison's another driver I want to shout out. He was really, really fast in this race, ended up finishing 5th. Hoskar got a top 5 finish. How about that? Shows that if you put a competent guy in the car, you're going to do really, really well. But I thought, like I said, the race was really, really good. And one thing about it is they did put new regulations. And one thing is that you can follow these cars a lot better, and you can pass these cars and put on a good racing. That battle between Max Verstappen and Charles Leclerc for those 5 or 6 laps was some of the best racing in Formula One I have ever seen. So these regulations definitely do help the racing. And like I said, it was a very enjoyable race. I really loved what I saw out there, and I thought it was a great race. And congrats to Charles Leclerc on picking up the victory in the Bahrain Grand Prix. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about the XPEL 375, as we're going to talk about that race now. Let's talk about the race overall. So this was the IndyCar race, the second race of the season. A lot of concerns came into this race. The first lap or so would be led by Felix Rosenqvist, and in the race pretty much would be dominated by Scott McLaughlin, who's coming off, of course, winning in the St. Petersburg Grand Prix not too much earlier in the year, the opening race for that. He pretty much dominated the race. Now, there were a lot of cautions that happened in this race. A lot of moves, of course, caused by Devlin DeFrancesco. Alexander Rossi had a power plant problem. Takuma Sato, he got into the outside wall. I think Romain Grosjean had an electrical problem as well during one of the yells. I think it was during the Takuma Sato yell. He had major problems. There were a couple of major incidents. You had Devlin DeFrancesco being a little bit over-aggressive and caused a 3 or 4 car incident, and they had a lot of issues late. And coming to the end of the race, it looked like it was going to come down between Scott McLaughlin and Joseph Newgarden for the overall victory. And it looked like that Scott McLaughlin had the race locked up in the bag. And then on the last lap of the race, we saw the move happen where Joseph Newgarden passed in a photo finish side by side to the line and comes off the corner and picks up the victory. Very heartbreaking for Scott McLaughlin. Scott McLaughlin definitely probably not happy with David Malukas, but David Malukas did have a really good run, finishing 11th in the O'Coin Racing Group. David Malukas trying to stay on the lead up. I get it, but I don't really like the fact that he did kind of affect the outcome. But at the same time, huge win for Penske. I feel for Scott McLaughlin. Basically, that guy's a championship threat this year. I think that guy will potentially win this championship. He probably should have won this race. But again, on the last lap, had a situation with Dave Malukas. I think it had been anybody else there, I think he probably would have won the race. Another driver I want to talk about is Jimmie Johnson. Jimmie Johnson finally had a great run in IndyCar. Ran in the top 10 most of the race and finished 6th. Really impressive run for Jimmie Johnson. The longer we got in the race, the better that Jimmie Johnson got. And I think Jimmie Johnson, like I said, put on an incredible show in this race. Nearly got a top 5. Got passed by Scott Dixley's. I think the tire degradation, unfortunately, came into play similar to Formula 1. He did really, really awesome. Yeah, like I mentioned, like I said, I really, really did enjoy this race. It was much better. I don't know if this will save Texas Motor Speedway. I know that Roger is trying to basically save Texas Motor Speedway at this point in the future of that. Good race, in my opinion. Great racing overall this weekend, and very exciting race. So congratulations to Joseph Newgarden on picking up the victory here at Texas Motor Speedway. We're going to jump on to the first of 3 major stories in today's episode, as we're going to talk about the Atlanta reconfiguration and drivers' thoughts on the Atlanta reconfiguration. Now, yesterday, of course, was the NASCAR Cup Series race at Atlanta Motor Speedway, and we saw a very good race and a very, very jam-packed race. But I wanted to see what drivers had to say about the Atlanta reconfiguration. Now, Kyle Busch, he was not very happy about it. Basically said nope. Was really, really mad, of course, getting taken out early in the race. But he said his thoughts on the Atlanta reconfiguration. He said nope, was really, really mad, and did not like the Atlanta reconfiguration. Kyle Larson basically did have a more positive thoughts on it, and basically said it was very difficult to pass here at Atlanta, and basically said he would rather have liked had a mile and a half, traditional mile and a half, but he did say that it was also at points very, very fun as well. Ross Chastain, after finishing runner-up in the NASCAR Cup Series race, he basically says that he wants Atlanta to be its own thing. He doesn't want to basically turn into Kentucky. He basically hopes that Kentucky gets kept 6 feet under, and he does not want any of the other tracks basically repaved. Do not change all these other intermediate tracks, mile and a half tracks, basically to super speed races like this, because that would not basically make it unique. And then Kurt Busch finally says that he was basically hopes for unrestricted in July. Kind of wants to see that as well. I'll give my overall 2 thoughts, and I think these drivers all have really, really good points here. Kyle Busch, you knew, was not going to be very, very happy about it, because, again, he was not a big fan of it to begin. Expected to be a big one and big wreck fest and all. Here's my 2 cents on the race. I really enjoyed what we saw here yesterday. I thought it was a really, really good race and very, very enjoyable. But I mainly agree with Ross Chastain here in a point where I do not want to see most of these races turn, in any more of these mile-and-a-halves turn into super speedway-like races. I think 4 was enough to begin with, and I think 6 was a little bit of a stretch. And we really did not have to turn Atlanta into a super speedway. But at the same time, an AJ Allmendinger, he talked about us, I believe, on Saturday. He basically said that this race may not have been as good with the normal package. And he may have been on point and right on point when they decided to reconfigure track. And maybe with just a repave, the racing may not have been as good, but also could have been maybe as good if we repave, because maybe the difference was different tire compound that they use, a different track compound that they basically use compared to other tires. But I really do not know. So NASCAR is really in a no-win situation right there. I think that we don't need to make every other one of these super races into super speedway-esque tracks. And there's a couple reasons for that. Number one, a lot of the owners are going to be really, really upset if we turn a lot of races into super speedway-like races. That's going to be a lot more torn-up cars, and especially with part shortage, yes, that probably won't be an issue a couple years down the road, but it's going to cause a lot more issues when it comes to team owners, and they're going to be a lot unhappy. Second thing, it's going to hurt the credibility of this championship. It's probably already hurt the credibility of this championship, the fact that we have 6 super speed races. And if we flood a lot of these tracks with super speedways and turn a lot of these intermediate tracks into super speedway-like races, it's going to hurt the credibility of this championship. Now, of course, a lot of people say, well, the playoffs are gimmicky, which is very, very true. Definitely very, very gimmicky. But you basically are going to hurt the legitimacy of your championship if you make these races into super speedways, and the champion will be less legitimate, because we do look at super speed races as not as legitimate as like other like mile-and-a-halves and even short track stuff as being more legitimate races. Now, of course, you have to be good in this stuff and you'd have to improve your craft, but that's a big thing right there, is it would hurt the legitimacy of this championship. Another thing I will say about this race and stuff is I do believe the race yesterday was a little bit too long. I personally think that both Atlanta races should be 400 miles. Now, the summer race later this year is going to be 400 miles long. And I know a lot of people are going to say this, well, you are against long races. And yes, I personally, again, I like racing. Do not get me wrong, and I love racing. So don't take this with the grain, don't take this out of context. I love racing. I'm not against racing in general. But I personally think that some of these races especially are a little bit too long. I think a lot of these cup races, especially intermediates, should be no longer than 400 miles. I don't think this race needs to be 500 miles long. I mean, this race was almost 4 hours long. I think it was over 4 hours long, if I'm not mistaken. So it was a very, very long race. And don't get me wrong, I love racing. But if you put these races way too long, people are not going to enjoy it, and the casual fans are going to turn off. Now, if you keep the entertainment up, they may stick around, but people have a lot more stuff to do nowadays, and there's a lot more entertainment factors out there. Look at IndyCar and F1's time combined. If you combine those times from yesterday, those times probably would have not even matched what the Cup Series race had as length. We got to shorten some of these races long term, and I hope that's one thing that NASCAR does in the future. Again, I love the racing, what we saw, but I do not want to see more super speedway races and these tracks turn into super speedways, because it's going to hurt the legitimacy of the championship, in my opinion, and it's going to hurt the credibility of the championship. So that's just my opinion on that. And now we're going to jump on to the next major story of today's episode, as we're talking about North Wilkesboro. Now, Marcus Smith, who basically owns SMI, who basically runs SMI currently, he talked about the future of North Wilkesboro. And he says he does not see a Cup Series race at North Wilkesboro in the future. He does see like local series and basically a truck series race there long term, but he does not see a Cup race happening in North Wilkesboro due to the market. This is definitely really, really interesting. I know that he mentioned it a couple months ago, I think back in early January or late December. They basically said that he was potentially looking at a truck series, but never mentioned a NASCAR Cup Series race. And I'll kind of disagree a little bit about the market and stuff, a little bit about North Wilkesboro. Yes, I think it's going to be tough to get a full crowd there at North Wilkesboro. Some people are not going to want to go. But there also are a lot of people that really want a Cup Series race back. Some new school fans and also some old school fans would like to see North Wilkesboro have a Cup Series date back. There's also a lot of new school fans as well that also do not, and old school fans who also are not a big fan of North Wilkesboro and don't see it coming back. But there also has been a lot of work on North Wilkesboro. We've been following the story about North Wilkesboro. Of course, they got $10 million grant money from the state. They have $1 million from Marcus Moniz, and also they've got another $10 million grant for having raced since 1996. I think they did after the 1996, basically try to get North Wilkesboro back. They sent a ton of money out to Charlotte Motor Speedway, also money out to Rockingham. That's another day where it could happen. And I will say this. I do believe that in the long-term future, I do see a race happening in NASCAR in the Cup Series, but it's not a Cup Series in North Wilkesboro, but a race in general for NASCAR. I don't know when that will happen, though. Again, it's going to be a few years for the track is still ready to go. There's definitely been a lot of cleanup, don't get me wrong, but I don't see that there will be a Cup Series, it won't be a race, at least for NASCAR, at least for the next 2 to 3 years. But I do think that if enough people want it, there could be a Cup Series racer. If enough people want it, it's one thing, they could. But I think that the timeline for this is I think that it's going to take at least a year or two for the track to be fully ready. I think the earliest that we can see even racing happening there, to be honest, late 2023, early 2024, if they continue to work on the track. But again, they can't just let it sit dormant. They're going to have to continue maintaining work on it. And like I've said, they have put a lot of work into North Wilkesboro and have been working on the track. But they will have to continue doing that, and a lot of things have to change. But they've been sending a lot of renovation plans, and it looks very similar to what they're doing with the National Fairgrounds, which that track is probably also a few years away from having a Cup date. But I will say one thing about short track racing. I do hope, and I do want to see a Cup Series race. Don't get me wrong, I do want to see a Cup Series race at North Wilkesboro, and I think a lot of fans would be craving for that. I just don't know if it's going to happen. I agree with Marcus. It's going to be very tough for that market to hold up because, again, you do have another race out in Charlotte, which really isn't that far away. And then, of course, you do have another race actually out in Rockingham, which that's another track that's really not too far away from the Charlotte area as well. So if you do fly the schedule in the Charlotte area, it's going to be a little bit overflooding. But again, there's a lot of fans in Charlotte, and Charlotte is one of the biggest areas for NASCAR. That being said, though, again, I don't know if there will be a Cup Series race in the future at North Wilkesboro. I really hope there is because I think it'd be really, really awesome. And it does suck that we're maybe not going to happen, but again, if I was running SMI or running NASCAR, here's my timeline for the return if there was Cup Series race here. I would have trucks in 2024, Xfinity in 2025, maybe Cup in 2026. Because again, if there was a Cup Series race, it happens because again, things can absolutely change when it comes to that. I think the earliest we could see one if there was a Cup Series, which again, he's saying it probably isn't going to, which I kind of disagree. But I think that it would be like 2026, 2027. So a lot of fans are going to be much older. I would be in my mid-20s. Some of these guys that do YouTube and stuff would be in their 30s. But I do think a race in North Wilkesboro overall would be really, really awesome. And I do hope at least, again, we're probably not going to see a Cup Series race most likely anytime soon for there. But I do hope long-term that maybe we can get a Cup race down there in the future, as I think North Wilkesboro is a great facility and a great track. And I do hope the long-term we can see a Cup Series race at North Wilkesboro. And now we're going to go on to the final major story of today's episode as we're talking about Tony Stewart. As expected, Tony Stewart is going to be returning to the Fox Sports booth this weekend as Circuit of the Americas. Now, Tony Stewart has already been in the Fox Sports booth this season so far. He was in the booth for the Busch Light Clash and was also in the booth for Daytona. He has not though been in the booth for the last couple weeks. It's been expected he was going to be in the Fox Sports booth at this weekend at Circuit of the Americas, but it wasn't confirmed until late in the race. Tony Stewart, in my opinion, has been a really good analyst this year. He did really, really good at the Busch Light Clash and also did a really, really good job at the Daytona 500. One of, I think, the bright shining stars that Fox has had this year as a commentator, considering the Busch Light Clash coverage and Daytona 500 coverage was not very good. Tony Stewart put on a really, really good show. Tony Stewart's someone that can be really, really funny, very similar to Larry McReynolds, but also can be very, very serious and kind of joke about things, but lead you into a different and any other conversation, which is something that this thing has been lacking with Fox. Because I think one thing that Fox has been lacking the last couple weeks, I will say this past week in Atlanta, the race we saw, the coverage, I thought for the Cup Series race actually felt pretty good, very similar to last year's coverage, which was really, really good. I think Jeff Gordon did a pretty good job in the booth. I know a lot of people maybe disagree with me on that, but I do think that Jeff Gordon did a pretty good job in the booth. That being said, with Tony Stewart, I think of all the commentators, maybe besides Matt Kenseth, I think Matt Kenseth, he did a really, really good job. I think Tony Stewart has generally been the best in the Fox Sports booth this year because he gives a lot of insight and a lot of great detail, and he's not very biased in the booth as well because, again, I think he does a really good job basically talking about insight and does a really good job presenting the sport as a color commentator. He feels like a Benny Parsons in the booth. It feels like going back in here like Dale Jarrett booths. I think Dale Jarrett does a really good job when he overall gets into the booth. And like I said about Tony Stewart, the guy knows what he's doing in the booth. He's not been in these cars in a couple years now, but he's also been in the next gen car as well. That's another thing. He can also give a lot of really awesome and a lot of great insight into the next-gen car. And yes, I know we've been a few weeks in, so a lot of us probably know at this point, know about the next-gen car. But he can continue, and we're going to a road course race. And not to mention, Tony Stewart is one of the greatest road course racers of all time. He's, I think, the second winningest driver on road. I think currently the second winningest driver on road courses, maybe tied with Chase Elliott right now. But he's one of the best road course racers of all time. So he's someone that when it comes to road course racing, he'll be able to give a lot of great knowledge about that as well this weekend. And like I've said about Tony Stewart already, the guy is awesome in the booth. He does a great job every time he gets in there, brings a lot of insight, and brings a popular face as well, because when people hear Tony Stewart's voice that have watched, who are casual fans who haven't watched in a few years, they're going to see, oh, Tony Stewart's going to be back in the booth. I'm definitely going to come out and check this race. And that's another thing. It can help the ratings a little bit, and more people can tune into it. Now, a lot, of course, we're probably going to see an increase in ratings from this past weekend at Atlanta, because more people were tuning in that to kind of see the new Atlanta Motor Speedway if it truly was a super speedway race, which, if you guess, it was basically like a super speedway race. But like I said already about Tony Stewart, we got a lot of great things to say about him. Tony Stewart, of course, being a legendary NASCAR driver and owner in our sport, and done a great job as a Hall of Famer as well, and absolutely kicking ass in NHRA right now too, winning races right there. But like I mentioned with Tony Stewart already, the guy knows how to get it done in the booth. He's done a great job in there, and I am very excited to see that Tony Stewart's getting back in the booth. I think he's going to do a really good job. I wish that he was doing it more than he already has this year, and I do like if Fox has been what they're doing in the rotation. They have had Jeff Gordon in the booth last week. They had Danica, which I'll admit Danica wasn't great. And then, of course, Matt Kenseth. I'm very intrigued to see who else they're going to get in the booth. Maybe Larry McReynolds will get in the booth. At one point, I know he was in the booth for the dual races, but I like to see him in the booth for one upcoming race, and maybe, just maybe, for the throwback race at Darlington. Maybe they can get the whole panel and have Clint Boyer out for 1 week and have Darrell Waltrip, Larry McReynolds, and Mike Joy call the throwback race. I think that'd be a throwback to Fox's old tenure, and I think that'd be really, really awesome. And maybe also Mark Martin could get into the booth as well. That's one thing I'm hoping. So overall, really excited to see Tony Stewart back in the booth, and I think he'll do a really good job. So anyway, that's today's long NASCAR and motorsports video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notification on to be notified when a video does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support me on Patreon as well. Links get below for that, and comment your thoughts on today's video. What are your thoughts about Tony Stewart returning to the Fox Sports booth this weekend? Let me know in the comments below. And what are your thoughts about more of the news we talked about today? Let me know in the comments below. Tomorrow on my channel, we're going to be taking a look at some of the early season trends of everything that we've seen and talk about those trends and some of the concerns I also have for certain drivers in the field. That'll be coming up on the channel tomorrow. So anyway, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's video, and I'll see you guys next time with some great, awesome NASCAR and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.